Welcome to SAM Conversations. Our guests today are from the IndustriAll Global Union, and we have with us Ms. Apoorva Kaiwar, who is the Regional Secretary of the South Asia offices. And joining us from Geneva is Mr. Brian Kohler, who is the Director, Health, Safety and Sustainability. We are now going to talk about a few things which have emerged on the industrial scenario after the lockdown has been lifted in various countries. Welcome to both of you. And let's start with something which doesn't sound very happy, but there have been a number of industrial accidents in India after the industry has started all over the world and also in India, trying to get back to work. Now, my first question would be to Mr. Kohler, that, when we look at this, as you see, we've had about 30 industrial accidents in India, which has taken about 70 odd lives and more than 100 people injured. Now, why do you think that this sort of thing is happening post coming back to work?
Thank you. My understanding is that when the lockdown was imposed in India, it was done rather hastily, and many of these industries shut down somewhat hastily. Now, there's different kinds of industries. If you think about a production process like an assembly line, it's not so hard to turn a switch and stop it, and everybody can leave and go home. But if you're talking about a continuous processing industry like a chemical plant or an oil refinery, or to some extent and in a slightly different way, a metal smelter or a pulp and paper mill, these are industries where the inputs are more or less continuous and the outputs are more or less continuous. We call them continuous processing industries. To shut one of these types of industries down takes planning, it takes time. I mean, yes, you can shut them down quickly in an emergency, but that's not a preferred way of doing things. And generally there will be problems if you shut such a type of process down very quickly without planning. Now, then it's been sitting idle for maybe weeks. I don't know the exact length of time. And suddenly somebody says, well, let's restart. Well, yes, you can do that, but that again requires careful planning, because since it was shut down hastily, there will be unexpected things going on. There will be solids that have settled out and plugged lines. There will be corrosion. There may be leakages. There may be electrical contacts that don't work when you try to start up a pump or a compressor or anything. So there's a branch of occupational health and safety called process safety management, which is intended exactly for these kinds of industries. And what should happen is a thorough inspection of the facility to try to identify any faults or any potential faults, and to have an emergency plan if things go wrong, because very likely they will, to make sure that your staff are fully briefed on what could possibly go wrong, and then start it carefully in a planned fashion, watching all of the indicators as you go. So I don't think this was done. I think instead there was a rush to try to get things restarted, and not proper care was taken.
Just if we can just widen the scope and move out of India, Apoorva, if you look at the South Asia region, we have a number of countries which also have industrial units. We're looking at Bangladesh and probably power stations in Nepal, if I'm not mistaken. Now, where do you think the problem lies in these countries? Or let's put it the other way, which are the high-risk countries? Mr. Kohler has just told us about the industries which are high risk. But would you be able to identify some of the countries in the region which should be very careful?
The point is that every factory is a hazard. Every factory is an unsafe place unless we actually take steps to make it safe. That's the bottom line. So if you're telling which country is at risk, all our countries at risk, because we don't have a safety culture. So that's one thing. But also coming again back to what my colleague Brian said, there are certain processes, like say chemical processes, which are continuous processes where there are chemicals interacting with each other to make something, to produce something, which is inherently unsafe. And there are a lot of chemical factories, a lot of pharmaceutical factories, both in India and Pakistan, these are two countries which have a lot of chemical and pharmaceutical industries. And unfortunately, we also have a situation where we don't see many unions in this sector. Many of, we have a thing that a unionized workplace is a safe workplace. Why? Because there are safety systems, there are protocols, even in law as well as in practice there should be, where the union and management sit together and come to a decision on how to maintain safety, how to keep our workplace safe. They're supposed to do it, it's in the law. So these safety committees actually are a very good safeguard to make sure that factories stay safe. And where you have a non-unionized workplace, it is not as if the union appoints people on the safety committees, it is whoever management chooses. So it might be somebody who's neither qualified nor would actually tell the management, be in a position to tell the management that what you're doing is unsafe. So this leads to a much more severe situation in terms of safety, or rather not being safe. So I would say that India and Pakistan, because both of them are large industrial nations. I mean, our populations may not be that much dependent on industrial employment as opposed to agriculture, but we have a large number of factories, we have big factories, we have a large number of industrial workforce, just in sheer numbers, if not in percentages of our country populations. So yes, so I would say that these two are the most unsafe. Bangladesh has learned its lesson, frankly. After Rana Plaza, you don't really see those kind of, the Bangladeshi sweatshop is no longer there. I mean, I'm sure there are a few here and there, mostly producing for local, production, but you don't see them as rampant as they were before. They have learned a lesson. The Bangladesh industry has learned a lesson. The government is being very strict. We do have non-governmental or, trade union responses such as the Bangladesh Accord, which were put in place. So the situation there is much better. In India and Pakistan, in both countries, that we've not been able to do that. And yes, so there is an inherent risk given the large number of factories, given crowded industrial estates, given also the fact that a lot of the small scale industries also run from residential areas. So I think both these, in my opinion, would be the most unsafe.
That point which you made about units running from residential areas, I think that must be happening in Bangladesh and Pakistan, India. I think these must be the three countries which would be, I should say, would be doing this more than any other country in this region. Or yes, would you include others also?
You are right. I mean, Nepal has cottage industries like carpet weaving, embroidery works, which are in the residential areas. But things that require heavy electrical, heavy chemical processes, you cannot really see in residential areas, either in Sri Lanka or Nepal. But you do see that in Pakistan, you do still see that in India. So the larger
Sri Lanka, Apoorva, what about Sri Lanka?
Sri Lanka has, Sri Lanka moved into these export promotion zones, industrial zones from the 70s. So while that has not been very good for labor rights, but they have demarcated industrial areas. So most of their factories are in these zones, either in the EPZs or in industrial zones. You don't really see that many in the residential areas.
So Brian, coming back to you, how do you people tackle this in your part of the world, say Europe?
Okay. I'm going to answer that question by elaborating a little bit on what Apoorva said. You can think of safety as having two sort of systems that help to ensure safety. One is the internal system, the other is the external system. The internal system is the system that includes the joint health and safety committees that Apoorva mentioned, management controls, trade unions, and all of these ideally would be working together to do as much as possible to ensure that the workplace is safe without reference to outside experts or enforcement. The external system, as I've just implied, is the external experts and enforcement. Usually we refer to the external system as being the government inspectorate, the legislative and regulatory framework, and all of the standards and guidelines that are referred to externally to that industry. So what's going on in other parts of the world is that there have been efforts to strengthen both of those systems over the years. What's happening in India that I think is unfortunate is that both of these systems have been weakened in recent years. So the internal system is weakened by the fact that there is limited trade union representation and limited opportunities for the workers who face the risks to identify those risks and get them corrected by management, because management is more interested in production. And the external system is being weakened because there's the sort of the ideology of deregulation and reduction of inspection and loosening of standards in the idea that this will somehow promote business. So when you simultaneously weaken both the internal and the external system, you're going to have problems. A third thing that I'm going to mention about particularly Southeast Asia. You know, following the Bhopal catastrophe in 1984, there was a period of time where the chemical industry felt very chastened and was, you know, not that they were saints or anything, but they were much more cautious about being safe. They were more open to discussions about being transparent and letting the workers and the community know exactly what they knew about the hazards of the work and so on. And I see that this has changed. And there's a culture of secrecy which has come back into the industry. And now, even when you have these accidents as recently as we've had in India, I look at the news reports and I look at the official reports that are being issued by the companies, and they're very guarded. Most of the time, I have a very difficult time understanding exactly what happened. I can usually infer what happened because I'm a chemist by education and I've worked in the chemical industry for many years myself. So I can read between the lines, but I see, rather than transparency, an effort to kind of conceal what has actually happened from the public. And that's very unhealthy, very dangerous.
Brian, as we wind up, there's one question I would ask you and Apoorva both, that, you know, after COVID lockdown, and now that the industry is opening up, has your organization put together a sort of set of rules and regulations or must-do items which you would be distributing to your various branches across the world? How do you intend to really play a role in this?
Well, I'll answer briefly, and then maybe Apoorva wants to answer as well. As you know, probably we've sent several letters to the government of India, to the Prime Minister, and pointing out that this rash of accidents can no longer be considered a coincidence, and because of the number of them, they must be considered a trend. And we've identified.
Brian, I'm also looking at other countries, you know, which Apoorva pointed out, you know, so yes. I'm looking at more at a macro level now.
Yes, yes. And we've pointed out that what needs to be done is to re-examine the external responsibility system, the government system, strengthen the inspectorate, make sure that process safety management principles are integrated into the legislative and regulatory framework, and really do a better job of that. And on the other side, we need to strengthen workers' organizations, trade unions, so that they can fully participate in health and safety. And anybody that wants technical information on things like process safety management, of course, I have that kind of information available, and I distribute it to whoever I think can use it or who asks me.
Apoorva, would you like to amplify on this?
Yeah, I mean, Brian has himself kind of authored a number of volumes in the last few months. We have the Getting Back to Work Safety. We have a manual on that. We have a COVID manual on keeping us safe. We have the right to, you know, what are the rights of workers at this time? And we've got it translated into, I don't know, about 12 languages, including Nepali, Sinhala, Tamil, Urdu, Bangla, Telugu, Marathi, Hindi, several Indian languages, and we've sent it across soft copies to everyone. It's a bit difficult for us to courier right now because couriers take a lot of time. So we've kind of sent it, and our affiliates are getting it printed and distributed in their own membership, as well as trying to get in touch with factories to say this is possibly what you do.
You people have told us, I'm sure it's going to be a lot of useful information and will help keep all of us across the world safe, more so in the countries which you've pointed out in the South Asia region. Thank you, both of you, for being with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.